and welcome to SoulWhat, a Soultopia podcast with our host, Matt Stoker. I'm our producer, Matt Stoker. I'm your
I'll host if you need me to.
Okay. I am your host, Michelle Welch.
And I'm Roger Welch. So what's up today, Michelle?
I'm clearly so excited about our guest tonight.
I can tell.
Yeah, right? I have been reading everything about him, and I'm so excited. We've been so excited to have him on. We have on tonight Dr. Hakeem Oluseyi. He's an American astrophysicist, cosmologist, inventor, educator, television personality, and public speaker. Since 2007, he's been a professor of physics and space sciences at the Florida Institute of Technology and has served at Science Mission Directorate at NASA. And Roger will explain later why I paused on that, and it's really embarrassing. At NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C., A Quantum Life, My Unlikely Journey from the Street to the Stars is Dr. Oluseyi's inspiring memoir. And by the way, that's coming out, you guys, in just a few days on June 15th. This book is a coming-of-age story, and I'm getting chills just reading it, in the vein of Born a Crime, The Other Wes Moore, and Lab Girl, about a black, world-renowned astrophysicist who emerges from an impoverished childhood and crime and addiction-filled adolescence to ascend through the top ranks of research physics. It is also a story about two Americas and the ways in which systemic poverty and racism can threaten to derail a life. Thank you for coming on. We're so glad to have you. I'm so glad I got through your last name twice. I want to start with your name. I want to start, and then we'll back up and go into your story. But your name, we talked about it before we went on the air. You were born with another quote unquote given name, and you changed your name. Can you explain a little bit about what your name means and why you changed it?
Yeah, so as I write in the book, my childhood was challenging, to say the least. And I had to basically reinvent myself when I became an adult. I had to relearn myself. And so when I did, I felt reborn. And I decided that I was going to change my name. And a part of that had to do with the history of where my name came from, right? And that is many African Americans did not choose their names. And I am fiercely rebellious and independent, a freedom-loving American. And so, I'm all about self-determination. Mm-hmm. So what I decided to do after I changed my life was to change my name. And I wanted my first name to express who I wished to become. That way, when people called me by my name, it would remind me. I wanted my middle name to express who I already am. And I wanted my last name to be West African, to honor that part of my ancestry, but also to have some nobility to it. So my middle name is Muata. It's Swahili, and it means he seeks the truth. My first name means wise, and my last name, Oluseyi, is Yoruba, and it means God has done this.
Wow, that's beautiful. And yes, you're certainly wise. As I'm reading off, right, Roger? We're reading off everything he's done.
Ma'am, it remains a goal.
Well, I love one of the things that I read somewhere, and I'm not sure where it is. I'm not sure, but you said something about. Well, tell us about the fact that you carried around the encyclopedia and you read them at 10 years old, but you understood at some point that you were really smart, but you needed knowledge. And I know we're jumping ahead again, but it just segued into that because I love how you notice there's a difference between that. There's smart and then there's knowledge. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I'll tell you this. So I grew up in the first part of my childhood up to age 13 was in inner cities. And it was New Orleans, Houston, and Los Angeles, South Central Los Angeles. But then I moved to rural Mississippi at the age of 13, and I was there from 13 to 24. Mm-hmm. And after I finished college, I went to the military in between. And after I went to college, I was accepted into graduate school at one of the top universities, Stanford University. And I looked around at the people around me, and I thought to myself, these people aren't intrinsically smarter than the people back in the communities in which I lived, in Mississippi and in the country and in the cities in which I lived. But they were much better formally educated, right? So I grew up from age 13 in the deep woods. And so, I did things like hauling pulpwood, hunting, farming, fishing, and you name it, right?
Hunting armadillo, right?
Oh, yeah. And I only discovered in 2017 that armadillos carry leprosy. So it's funny because when I'm lecturing my courses, I'll just break in and be like, hey, you guys know how to clean an armadillo versus cleaning a squirrel versus cleaning a raccoon. I throw my country stuff and they're weird about, just to break up the monotony of physics sometimes. But yeah, it is a real phenomenon that, I grew up around a lot of smart, hardworking people.
Right.
But, we were manual laborers, right? We were self-sufficient, living on farms, taking care of ourselves, right? There wasn't an opportunity to go out and get a job. So I'm in my mid-50s. People sometimes think I'm younger. So I was a kid in the 70s, right? And so it wasn't until like the 90s that people started getting jobs in town.
Right. So I'm still jumping ahead. So I'm doing the math. I think Denzel could play you in the movie because he has a movie deal for this book. So yeah, I think Denzel could. He's like my
it's about
favorite.
the young me. It's about the young me.
Well, maybe Denzel. Maybe they could do the photoshopping thing. No, we have it's the other guy that you said on another show. What's his name?
Michael B. Jordan.
Yeah, he could do it too.
There you go.
All right. But I really let's jump back a little bit since I jumped ahead. Tell us a little bit about that growing up and that young boy who was. That young boy that was really smart and knew he was smart and was around a lot of smart people, but was in difficult circumstances. Do you mind just telling us a little bit more about that? Lay the background of your story a little bit more?
That's
or
right.
your life.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Now, mind you, I was what they called book smart. So when they said a kid was smart where I lived, that meant that they did what they were supposed to do without being told, right? They handled their chores without being told. Oh, that's a smart child. But me, I was weird to adults. And my sister, my mother had 2 kids, my older sister and me. And my sister was always apologizing. Oh, he has a vivid imagination. Oh, forget him. And let me tell you, I was always in trouble. I was taking apart everything in the house and I would get great ideas, and I would mix chemicals together and just do all sorts of weird things. But at the same time, my parents divorced when I was 4 years old, and we started moving, and we literally moved every year. I never went to the same school 2 years in a row, never lived in the same state 2 years in a row until I reached middle school. So for a decade, from age 4 through 13, it was back and forth. And the same communities I mentioned, New Orleans, 9th Ward, New Orleans East, Houston, 3rd Ward, South Park, South Central Los Angeles, and Pomona, Los Angeles. And in fact, at the end of that, there was a 16-month period where I lived in 9 homes and attended 5 different schools in 3 different states. And, my mom would send me to live with people. And in that time period, the man of the house decided to abuse me each time. Now, it was never sexual abuse. It was a lot of overworking me, waking me up in the middle of the night, because I have a sense of humor and would joke a lot. There was this one guy, James Davis, who would wake me up in the middle of the night and make me read Bible verses about being a fool because, as a jokester, he saw me on my way to being a fool and he didn't want that to happen.
Yeah.
And because I live with my mother and my sister, the males in my family were like, and friends, oh, let's prevent him from being a sissy by beating him, right? So I got it from every direction. And just to let you know, my first cousins, my male 3 first cousins, were members of the Crips gang, and 2 of the 3 ended up going to prison for bank robbery, and 1 is still there. And on my father's side, my father was a ahead of his time entrepreneur, and if he were alive today, he'd be tickled to learn that his business is now legal in many Western states.
That's right. You talk about that, and as far as the systemic poverty and racism, and we do know now that there was so much of that. And I watched just recently a documentary on some of those areas, and I can't speak to it personally, but
Right.
what do you think being moved to so many different places and going through that and being around that, what do you think was in you that made you different, like not different, but have something that shifted a little, or did that shift come later?
Right. Yeah, it was a couple of things, right? It was maybe 2 or 3 things. I'm sorry for revealing my knee there.
That's okay. One time I took off, much to Matt's chagrin. I said I always wanted to be it was not an astrophysicist, I will tell you. I wanted to be a Kilgore College Rangerette, and I took off, because I'm from Longview, Texas, okay? And I took off my little boot and I put it up on here, and our producer thought he was gonna die. At least we didn't have a guest on, okay? So you can reveal your knee if you want to. But what do you think? An important question. What do you think?
Yeah, so there were different things. So on the one hand, this is, me poking fun. I often tell my friends I'm really lucky because, I've had guns pulled on me by white guys and black guys. And I've been abused by black police and white police, right? Mm-hmm. But it's true. Among all groups of people, it's a distribution. There are really good people, there are really bad people, but most people are just normal people. Mm-hmm. Now with me, I happen to be interested in what I was interested in. I was interested in 2 things: the natural world and just weird stuff. So if you remember, like, back when I was a kid, Bigfoot, Yeti, Time Life books, sharks, all this kind of stuff was on the television all the time.
All the time.
And so where do the natural world and weirdness meet? Physics. That's where. Yeah. And so, because I was interested in it and because I was isolated, I bonded with books, right? We're social animals, we bond. I bonded with books. I was left alone a lot. My mom, one thing about my family is you're gonna work. And, that usually starts young in the country, right, at 12. But I have a horrible skin condition. So I couldn't, I would just get inflamed when I went out and worked on the farm or in the woods. So they were like, you gotta stay home. And so that's what I did. I read books. I read the Bible cover to cover. I went through the encyclopedias. And I just bonded with books and devoured them.
Yeah. Sounds like somebody I know.
Right here.
All I love to read. But
everybody in Mississippi is that way. Yeah. Everybody from Mississippi.
So I'm the one who read, but Longview.
Oh,
but yeah. So I try to get him to read.
All right. So I graduated school from North Mississippi, a little town called Iuka. Which town? Iuka.
Iuka. I know Iuka.
Yeah. So what city are you from? Because I never did hear anybody say.
Oh, okay. So I lived in Jasper County and Clark County. So where I am from, my ancestral homeland is a little area known as East Barnett, right off of Highway 11, between Laurel and Meridian. That's the official name, but everyone calls it Piney Woods.
I know where that is. Piney Woods Flats and all that.
Not the Piney Woods School near Jackson.
Yeah, no,
not that.
Because I used to travel from Jackson over to
Pachuta.
We're
right next to Pachuta. That's what our mail says. Our mail says Pachuta.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be like Route 1, Box 194, Pachuta, Mississippi. Right?
Yeah, you're right. There's not a whole lot out there.
All right.
No, man. In fact, I went back, and because of what I said, that people, started getting jobs rather than being self-sufficient.
Right.
I visited in 2019, and the place had been abandoned where I grew up. The dirt road I lived down is no longer a road, it's woods now. Yeah. And this is something that's happened in recent years because I go back all the time.
Yeah. So, and I'm like you. I mean, I think we're probably really close, same age and everything.
Yeah.
Graduated about the same time and all. And anything, aliens, UFOs, Sasquatch, anything, right? I into all of it, right?
That was the good stuff, right?
And I still do. And even when they were telling me you were going to be on, I was like, who's going to be on? Wait, what? That name sounds so familiar. Why not? And then I heard your voice. So, guys, if you definitely, if you've seen these shows, you've actually, recognized the voice.
I played something for him today, and people in the store goes, I know him. I've heard him I've listened to him on YouTube, on TED Talks, and we're like,
I saw him on TV.
Yeah, so
on all the shows, talking on TV.
All this week I've been talking about the UFO Pentagon report on the.
I was going to ask you about that. So that was the follow up. Here was what I was going to say, and then I want to know what you. So we had a whole show on it, and my follow up was. Well, it seemed to me the update on the Pentagon report, and you can correct me, it was, and now they're not UFOs, they're UAPs. The Scientific American said no big reveal, that there was no conclusive evidence. And then I heard you on another show say that if there really were aliens, they were going to be really short and really stocky because they've been trapped under ice for all these years because
On the super Earth.
on the super Earth. So tell us about the Pentagon report, if we can, what your thoughts are.
So there's two things about the Pentagon report. So what they're saying is actually true. If you have a claim to make, right? I have observed this. I have observed aliens. Then you have to make a conclusive case for that. So as a scientist, as a physicist, we work on things for years, and then we submit it to our colleagues. And 100% of the time, the answer is like, whatever, Hakeem, right?
Yeah.
We don't trust you because we don't trust anyone, right? So even when you're right, they take you through the ringer. And so what we have here is a release of data. It's not a release of we have conclusively observed anything.
Yeah.
Now, the second thing is people are filling in the unknown with their favorite idea, right? And so we have to leave it as an open question. We see something. What do we see? Now, the good thing about it is that what I'm hearing from pilots is that there was some sort of stigma to reporting things that you see that are weird. Now, let's look at what happened in the past. Pilots were reporting seeing lightning go up from clouds into space. And it turns out they were correct. They were observing things called sprites and elves. It's a phenomenon of atmospheric electricity that we now know is real. But back in the day, they didn't know it was real. So pilots were like, oh, I'm not going to tell anyone because they're going to think I'm crazy. So if they are destigmatizing, reporting things that, the more data, the better. That's how we get to the truth, is by getting all the information and analyzing it.
Right. Very good. Yeah. And just to clear up in the opening, the bio, when I say NASA headquarters, Roger, you want to tell quickly because we have so much
like
to
I
cover.
said, like the DVR at home, because I'll just hit, record a bunch of it. And then if I get time, I'll go back and watch it. I hear her yelling from the living room.
This was a long time ago.
What the hell is all this NASA on the TV? I'm like, NASA? What the hell do you mean NASA? So obviously I went right out and bought NASA shirts to wear.
I almost wore it tonight because I knew that he was going to say
What's that?
it. And the minute I read it, I was like, okay, let's go ahead and make, I've been to that. Come on, I know. But when you're reading it on your TV, I was like,
exactly.
Right there.
Because it's all.
You didn't put two and two together.
Because it's all it's like when you had TiVo and the whole thing's taken up with, NASA.
Well,
Anyway, so thank you for clarifying. We were thinking not much would come out from the Pentagon, right?
I told you nothing would come out, Matt.
Yeah, what did you think? Yeah,
I mean,
you
that's
weigh in
I think
on
that's
this?
going to play out about what we thought.
Yeah. That's
I am curious, though, what are your thoughts on Bigfoot now that we have you here?
Well, you should see my feet. But let me tell you my thoughts on life in the universe. Okay,
Okay.
because that's what we're getting at. So let me give you a picture. Here's what I think is common. So where is life going to start is where there are liquids. Where are there liquids? Here on Earth, they're in the oceans, right? But only one other body in our solar system has surface liquids, and that's Titan, the moon of Saturn, okay? Now, where liquids occur, they're going to occur under a thick atmosphere or thick miles of rock or miles of ice. What we have here on Earth with this transparent, super thin atmosphere and a really strong magnetic field, that's not going to be common in our universe. Very, very uncommon. So there's going to be liquids. There's going to be the conditions for getting life started everywhere. But the difference is I have a thing of liquid, I sprinkle early life in it, right, and let it sit. In most places, it's going to sit. But here's what happened differently on Earth. Nutrients were being sprinkled into it constantly. What do I mean by that? We had a moon. We have a moon. The moon was much closer. The tides in the early days of Earth weren't measured in feet, they were measured in miles. So all the material didn't settle down to the bottom of our bodies of water. It kept being stirred up and mixed up. And then you shine sunlight on it, right? So you have a bucket of liquid with early life, nutrients, stir it up, shine sunlight on it for 4 billion years, and now you set the stage for a Cambrian explosion of life like happened here on Earth. That's going to be rare, which means that technologically advanced civilizations are incredibly rare. So my take is life everywhere. Technologically advanced life virtually nowhere, but exists.
Yeah. I kind of
Makes
agree
sense.
with that. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I like
Plus, last night I had like 10 minutes and I was scrolling through the mindless Facebook, and one of the groups popped up. You know, the alien gray. I was and it hit me all of a sudden. This guy's like got muscles on top of muscles, and he's like really cut, and he's not wearing clothes. Well, you know what? Why aren't these people wearing? If I get all cut, I can just stop wearing clothes altogether, like they are. I mean, what the hell's up with this?
If you show up in a movie and you're cut, chances are your shirt's coming off.
Yeah.
Does it make
chances
space
are.
travel better? You know, no clothes.
that
space
guy
travels
who's playing
better?
in you in the movie, you know, he's ripped. So
That's right.
Yeah.
So you had this encounter at age 10 with Albert in the books. With Albert Einstein and his theory of relativity. And I heard you say something, I'll probably get it wrong, but we're going to try here, that general relativity's easy, like time travel. And
That's special relativity.
Special
relativity
okay,
is
I
easy.
told you. I get general relativity, and then special relativity, like time travel's easy, which I was like, yeah, that's really cool. So you got to know Albert Einstein, and through all your reading, and this all became very interesting to you, and books, and then there were 2 movies that were your favorite movies. Could you tell us a little about that and how those movies and these books begin to form you? And we've already talked about some of the rough things you went through, but I love this how then this knowledge started forming in you, and you were gaining access maybe to things that other people didn't have an opportunity or didn't gain access to, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. You know, it's almost funny because it reminds me of what happened to me, like what happens to all of us on the internet now. You start in one location, you find yourself going down a path, right?
Yes.
But I did it analog. But here's what happened. When my mother had a best friend, and our families were together a lot. 2 single mothers. So my mother and her 2 kids, Miss Jeannie and her 6 kids. So her youngest was 2 years older than me. His name is Darren Brown. Darren ended up being either the highest or second highest ranking African American in America's submarine fleet. He's now retired from the military. And he ran the military base at Ames outside of San Jose. But he was my childhood friend, and he was a smart kid. And so he gave me sort of like the smart kid identity, right? Intellectual kid identity. So what my mother did is she ordered these books that put in my name and Darren's name in the book, and also my older sister, right? And so that's what got me reading and got me interested in books. And then my sister, she was, she's 6 years older than me, so I'm in the 1st and 2nd grade. She's in middle school. She took mythology, and she brought home Edith Hamilton's mythology book, right? And I started reading that, and that's just like, I just love the gods and all those stories. And I'm just devouring all of my childhood books. And I moved to New Orleans, and I'm with this guy, Darren, all the time, Darren Brown. He teaches me chess, and, I'm just, it's like intellectual. Now, don't get me wrong. We're also stealing and fighting and all this other kind of stuff, right? But we were doing the intellectual stuff. And what happens is I go to Mississippi, and my cousins introduce me to comics, Marvel Comics, DC Comics. So I'm going along this path. And then when I find myself back isolated again in the inner city in New Orleans, there's nothing to read. My mother has a set of encyclopedias. And so, I get, how it was back in the day, they kick you out the house, get out, right? And you show back up right before sunset. If you need a drink of water, drink it out the hose pipe, right? So I would go sit in the stairwell and read. And I was reading, I started at A, went to B, C, D. When I got to E, I run into Albert Einstein. And it wasn't that I wanted to know him so much as I wanted to understand how this time travel works, how lengths change. Because what the encyclopedia was saying is that this is real. right? This is not like the comics. This is real, and it's written down mathematically. So I made a vow that I'm going to understand this, and it turns out that 7 years later, I end up winning first place in the Mississippi State Science Fair for programming the effects of special relativity. And that's when the judges said to me, "You should be a physicist." But I had no idea what that meant, and I went into the military instead.
Right. So that was that around 7th grade when you did the science fair, and that's your, it said.
No, that was my junior and senior year
Okay,
of high
but
school that I did the science fair. So I started reading and studying at that time
Doing all
period,
that.
right? And it took me that long to really get it.
But you were, I love you say something about you straddled the gangster. I can't say that. You say gangsta.
Gangsta,
I can't,
nerd.
another thing, science nerd divide, dealing joints at school while winning statewide science fairs. I think that's, fascinating, but it wasn't till when you got, and we're not there yet, but I want to tie it together. Do you feel now that what your father made into a great business and now is becoming accessible everywhere, do you feel that's some sort of gateway drug? And I know I'm just throwing that out to you because you ended up having some addiction issues. I've had issues with it too, so you don't even have to answer the question if you don't want to.
No, I'll answer it. I'm an open book.
Because I don't even know what I think. But I just was like, it just came out of my mouth. So there it is. So
I feel like it. I feel like this about it. People who do extreme things tend to do less extreme things first. It's not that those less extreme things lead to those extreme things, but most people before they drive a car, they ride a bicycle or a skateboard, right? It doesn't mean that riding a skateboard or riding a bicycle leads to driving a car. You just are starting up, right? And what really matters is where you end up, not what you try along the way. Because a lot of people try a lot of things, and for the most part, all the people around you are doing what they're doing, and a few people get in trouble doing what they're doing. And it depends on what they're doing, right? The rate of getting in trouble is a lot higher for certain things than others.
Right. So when you went to college, so where'd you go to college before?
So after I got out of the Navy, I enrolled at Tougaloo College right outside of Jackson, Mississippi.
Okay. And did you start experiencing there the people did not believe? I know when you got to Stanford, the people just didn't believe. And I'll just say bluntly, I know that there were people. I'm older than both you guys, and I know that there would be people who would say some people aren't as smart, or women aren't as smart, or African Americans not. That's just truth. I mean, we're just shooting straight here. We would hear those. We would hear those kinds of things, and you write about. You write about that, and you faced that a little bit, didn't you?
I faced it a lot. And here's the thing that people have to understand too, right? So I remember when I was in grad school, there was another guy who came to Stanford after me from Mississippi. And somebody came to me and was like, "Hey, we asked this dude about racism in Mississippi. He said there's not any, but you said there's a lot. What's the difference?" And I'm like, "Look, either you're doing it or you're subjected to it. And if you're not doing it or subjected to it, how do you know it exists?" Right? And I think one of the worst things about racism is that it's associated with hate. And I think that when it manifests itself most of the time, it's not because people are hating each other, right? I think it's an easy way for someone to feel better than someone. People, everybody wants to ride first class. Everybody, wants to one-up the next person. And so what's easy to go after, right? If they want to, if somebody wants to victimize someone in your workplace, in whatever group setting, they go for the outlier, the person that's different from the others. And that difference can manifest itself in many different ways, right? And so I think that so what happened at Tougaloo was, I was vastly undereducated. When Mississippi evaluated all of its schools around the year 2000, every school was given a rating from 1 to 5, with 1 being like an A and 5 being like an F. There were 4 schools in the state that got that worst grade of F, 2 of them were my junior high school and my high school.
Wow.
So I was incredibly undereducated. And so when you get into the academic realm, you know, there is an elitism to academia, especially as you go higher in academia. So Tougaloo College is a private college. So there were those students that had that identity of, oh, we're the smarter, more high class people, right? And then there were the people that were more like me, right? But when I got to Stanford, there were fewer people that were like me and more people that were, you know, that had that particular identity of class. So I'll tell you a funny story. I was talking to my mother when I was in graduate school, my first year, and she said something about race. And I said to her, I was like, Mom, being white ain't even good enough here. For example, one of the things that I heard immediately was your Southern accent. Have you ever heard a scientist on television with a deep Southern accent?
Oh, no. They think people assume I'm stupid.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I had a deep Southern accent. I had to change the way I speak
Yeah.
when I got to graduate school so people would understand me, right? And I
yeah.
always say one of the best things I learned wasn't the physics, but really the camouflage. So they don't, you know, people will prejudge you a mile away if they think of you in a certain way, right?
Absolutely.
And so I can come across as a high-class professional.
Yes.
Here I'm wearing a T-shirt, but, you know, it's a pandemic.
I get your point. And for me, I won a lot of cases as a lawyer in Marshall, Texas, and in Dallas, Texas, because of this accent. But I would go, and I see it gets more so because I'm just a rebel.
Depends
So
how she turns it on more.
I turn
too.
it. It turns into a 1-syllable word. Turns into, instead of 3, it turns into 5 syllables because I'm so defiant. But go to around my East Coast educated friends, and all of a sudden I'm a 1-syllable word is a 5-syllable word because I'd be damned if I was going to change it. I wasn't as smart as you, and but I'd win cases because unless I needed to act more appropriate. But I get what you're saying, and. But you're absolutely right. So you pile on more things, or if someone's obese, that's even another thing.
Right.
But
a man who's short of stature. I mean, there's all different ways. You know, everything
Right.
comes into play. Yeah.
but certainly the racism is real and was a big part of it. And you had someone, and part of it is you did get into heavier drugs when you were at Stanford, right? And so,
Well, I got into it before Stanford,
Okay.
and I took it with me.
I
I had 3 bouts of, going in to a bad place.
Yeah.
They occurred in 1980, 1990, and 1992. I described 1988 and 1992 in the book because I just didn't want to overwhelm the audience with, the readers with just bad stories, right?
Right.
But no, I did. I did go in, and it was out of, it was happening around me for a year and a half, and I did not participate. I observed it happening around me, and everybody was encouraging me to participate. Nobody knew how horrible it was, and how horrible it was going to be. And when I say people, I mean my own father, my own brother, my good friends. And finally, when I hit a very low point in my life, and I was feeling very self-destructive at a very young age, 21 years of age, I participated, and it was a bad decision on my part. But I try to come to an understanding and understand people. And I think that when we make it to a decision, it minimizes the entire context and the entire challenge that a person faces, right?
Right.
It's not just say no, or I'm just making a decision that day. It's a lot more complex than that.
It's a lot more. I definitely feel you on that one. So been through some tough times myself. So that's when there was also a mentor that shaped your life while you were at Stanford, and I think that's so important. And that's why it's important for people to hear stories like yours. And I don't mean that corny. That's why it's so important. I was listening to you give another. I told you I stalked you. I listened to all the YouTube. Another one where it was your TED Talk, I think, where you talked about you turned infinity, a speech on infinity. Right. You guys can listen to his TED Talk. You turned infinity into basically hope. The end of your speech was about hope. Your TED Talk speech. And it sounds like there were certain people placed in your life, however you believe that happened. And, I looked up, because the name of your book is Quantum Life, and you can explain why you named it that, but quantum living is an approach to living. You guys, this is from the Huffington Post, whatever y'all think about that. But quantum living is an approach to living that allows us to see our role in life of that of an active creator rather than just the passive observer, creatively shaping our experience in a conscious and connected universe. And I take that as maybe kind of being creators or co-creators of our own reality. You quoted Deepak Chopra in one of, I think maybe it was the TED Talks. So your book, tell us a little bit about how that all ties into titling your book and the what you went through and that quantum life.
Yeah. So, my physicist perspective on the word quantum is somewhat different from their meaning, but they take their meaning from physics. And if you look at the laws of physics, right, when they were first formulated by Isaac Newton, they were what we call deterministic. So if I, for example, give you the initial conditions of motion, say I have the angle and the speed trajectory, right? That initial condition not only determines the entire trajectory, it also determines the destination. So if I created a million identical little cannons at the same angle, same speed, all of those trajectories would be the same. Now, if I take this experiment and make it super tiny on a time size scale of atoms, now we're in the quantum realm. And what happens there is the physics works differently. The initial conditions do not tell you what the trajectory or destination is going to be. It tells you what the possibilities are. And each possibility, each possible trajectory has a probability assigned to it. And so I think that our lives are more like quantum physics than they are deterministic physics.
Gotcha.
When you're born, you're born into a family, you're born into a country, you're born into a town, and it's completely out of your control. Those are your initial conditions. And it can look like your life trajectory and destination are set before you ever act. But those small probability outcomes do occur.
Yeah.
And I'm a living example of that. Now, there's another phenomenon in quantum physics where if you're not actually interacting with something, and it can exist in multiple states, like, for example, I could be sitting or standing, right? I could be a gangster or a nerd, right? Then before you observe it, the system is actually in both states simultaneously. So if you're not looking at me, I'm sitting and standing at the same time. I'm half sitting, half standing. But then when you look, I must either be sitting or standing, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the way it really works on the quantum level. So I was living a double life for, up until my mid to late 20s. So that was a part of my quantum life. And then I quantum tunneled out of the most likely outcome for my life and ended up where I am today.
Yeah. Wow.
That's pretty cool.
What do you, while he was talking, he's so smart. I was thinking, what did you do, Roger, for your science project?
Oh, I did one on how eclipse work. Actually, I made the entire model. Had light in the top, had the sun and the moon and the earth all rotating around.
And everybody said, wow, because nobody knows.
Yeah, I thought it was actually kind of cool. And I did the same thing because my mom had those encyclopedias, the kind of burgundy with the little blue stripe. And you went a little deeper into it than I did, though.
I have to admit, I don't have a clue. I think my partner's mom primarily did it, not because I'm a cheater, but because she was very pushy. And I just said, fine. And I'd go over there and then I'd just be like, I think it was something to having to do with music and tones or something. What did you do, Matt? Do you remember?
I remember one where I did a project on mold. And so I put the biggest, I don't even remember what the end result was, but the lead up to it was like a couple of weeks worth of putting, I had a bread in a bag, like in a plastic bag, and I stuck it in this classroom closet up like at the top where it was like dark. And I check on it every day. And so like the kids just, like the other kids in the class were just like, oh, what's going on with your bread today? And like, so I was like growing mold on the bread. And again, I don't remember what I was trying to get out of it other than to grow it and
You don't
just
know
show
what the
that.
hypothesis.
No, I have no. I cannot remember it at all. We weren't very big on the science fair type stuff. We did some of this stuff in one of my whatever they called it, the gifted and talented classes is where that happened. But I did one on mold and I did one on acid rain back because it was in the 90s.
wow.
So acid rain was like gonna come get us all.
It was killing everybody.
Okay.
It was getting everybody. So I did one on that. But yeah,
All
the
the
mold.
statue people.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I want to make sure we have enough time for you to definitely say as much as we want to about the book, because I am definitely going to. I get the Kindle version of most all my books, and then I also get the hardback version of all my books. So Rogers rolls his eyes because I have all
Hey,
versions.
I'll tell you something funny, right? So, the reviews have been rolling in, okay?
I'm sure they're
and
great.
Everybody's like, oh my God, I can't put it down. You ever read a book, you don't know why, you just love it, it's just so good, right? And I'm like, I'm trying to get some deep points over here, and nobody's getting my deep points. Everybody's like just enjoying the story.
Well, that's because you have a great story, and they'll get the deep points too. That's
Yeah,
what.
no, I am not.
Yeah.
I'm being funny.
I know, and you are.
It's for you. It's for the people, right? You get out of what you get out of it.
And you guys, is it Bill Nye the Science Guy? Is
Yeah,
that who
yeah, Bill Nye the Science Guy, yeah.
endorsed it, and other really, But I think you're the new go-to person because you're so personable, and so I was gonna do this little thing if we have just enough time. Okay.
All right, let's do it.
So. And you're going to be like, yeah, these are boring. And if they're boring, we will skip on. Do you want to read them?
No, let's do it.
Go ahead,
do
do
you
it.
agree with, and you'll go number one.
Oh, it just
Okay.
blanked.
Okay, well, number one. Okay, here we go. You touched it and messed it up.
You handed it to me.
Okay, hold on. Here we go. Number one, don't touch the screen.
All right. Evolution unites all of biology. Evolution.
No, just read
what do
the
you want me to-
sentence. Does he agree with
All right.
that statement?
All right.
Because
so-
it says some scientists, and I know he's an astrophysicist, the
Yeah.
smartest kind, right? But and cosmologist and all these other. But read that first sentence.
All right. So evolution unites all of biology.
Yikes. So you don't know what you don't know. And we're defining biology in a particular way. And that definition undergoes Darwinian evolution. So it is defined to be that.
Yeah.
Okay. Number two.
Animal testing is necessary.
Oh, wow.
That's a hard one.
That is a hard one because, again, the thing that us physicists can do, which everybody else hates, is that we can perform a dispassionate analysis like we are not humans ourselves, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so if I look at the human species, right? Homo erectus did not do any animal testing, and they lasted millions of years, right? So it's not necessary. It all depends on it's a choice, what kind of life you want to live.
Yeah.
So we're in a situation where we're saving lives and we're making medicine better and we're extending lifespans. We don't have to do that, right? We could go back to being hunter-gatherers.
Right.
It's a choice.
It's a choice.
Yeah.
It's a choice, just like what we were talking about earlier. Okay. Number three.
Embryonic stem cell research.
Same
thing.
thing, right? You see the potential of it. So it all depends on who do you want to be and what do you want to do.
Yeah.
Right? And it's kind of arbitrary. So look.
And I don't think all of these are ethical questions. I think are they?
No, I'm not saying it's
Yeah.
a matter of ethics. It's a matter of if stem cell research, right? So
Right.
what is the potential? Just like if I had like protons and neutrons, they have the potential for life built into them.
Mm-hmm.
You can make stars and planets and us out of protons, electrons, and neutrons. Well, with stem cells, you can make any cell. And so if you want to understand life and biology and you want to have a architectural hand, then you're going to have to do stem cell research. But again, it's a choice. You don't have to do that.
Right.
Vaccines don't cause autism.
Oh, you could have skipped that one. We don't need
these are
to.
yours.
We don't need to
Yeah.
do that
So,
one if you don't want
How
to.
about
You don't have to do that, but I would tell you this.
Okay.
So I don't. So there's a difference between knowledge and belief. And so if you watch my TED Talk on the Big Bang, I talk about that in there, right? So to know something means you've confirmed it to be true. To believe something means you accept it as true without confirming it. So something like the autism question, I have to ask about likelihoods and probabilities because I don't know and I don't believe, right? And so I know the scientific community. And if you listen to people talk about the scientific community, I get the idea that people think that every 30 or 40 years, all the world scientists go in a big room and it's the same topic. What's the big lie we're all going to agree on, right? Global warming or whatever, right? That meeting never happens, right? We never collaborate. It's the exact opposite. Every scientist hates every other scientist and tries to destroy them. So I forgot how I got on that.
No, but I get what you're saying.
There you go. There's a large hadron collider won't destroy Earth.
I can say that that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's been looked at rigorously whether or not it will create a black hole or open a new universe. And the answer is it does not seem to be the case.
Okay.
Yeah. Nuclear power is safe.
I'm a fan of nuclear power.
There you go. Yeah. Climate change is largely man-made.
Okay. Current climate change looks to be definitely man-made, but understand this. I think we're not looking at this right. What is happening here is in the last century, we understand now, and no one's putting it this way, that we can actually engineer our atmosphere, right? The atmosphere is not the ocean. The atmosphere is a lot less material than the ocean. The atmosphere is next to nothing. And, we had acid rain, we had a hole in the ozone layer, now we got so-called global warming. The point is that it's such a small volume of stuff, you can engineer it, you can change its chemical composition and make it do what you want it to do. So how do we optimize it for our benefit is what we should be asking, rather than how do we deal with the latest emergency, because we're not engineering it, we're just going off willy-nilly and being reactive.
Right.
Okay, so I've got one.
Okay.
And this is for our Star Wars people out there. So TIE fighters, twin ion engine fighters.
Okay.
At one time, there was no way, they're like, we can't figure out how to actually make this engine and all that. You've been at MIT. I heard you talking about it, so possible or not, you got it figured out, right?
Yeah, my student saw it. So I'll tell you something that's interesting that happened. So I went into Silicon Valley right after graduate school. And when I was in graduate school, the thing that I just found fascinating was, I'll ask you guys this question, because I always ask my students this. So the first question is a two-part question. The first question I always ask is, what is matter made of? Because everybody knows that answer. And the answer is atoms, right? Some people will say, oh, protons, electrons, but let's just say atoms, okay? But then if you ask people, where does light come from? No one knows the answer. Everyone will say the sun, and some people will say energy, right? But the answer in the simplest terms is matter makes it. And when matter makes light, the signature of what that matter is and what that matter is doing when it makes the light is encoded in the light. And that's how we're able to read light and tell what's happening billions of miles away. Now, what was the question again?
Is it possible to make that TIE fighter?
Yeah. So here's what I did. In grad school, I went into Silicon Valley and I used my experience on interactions of light and matter and quickly got a set of patents. And that taught me a lesson. So I told my students, look at areas that are near what we're doing, because your skills might be an easy fix for what someone else is working on that they find difficult. And so one of my graduate students named Dave Chesney came to me and he said, hey, you see what the sun is doing on a scale of millions of miles, and it's happening in galaxies on the scales of light years, and it's happening in the magnetic field of Earth on the scale of miles. I think we can do it in a small volume, and we can create a new ion propulsion technology. And we did it. We published it in May 2018. Excuse me, not May, at the end of 2018. And so, yes, we now have ion propulsion. It is real. It was invented before our invention, but our invention is 50 times faster than everyone else's.
So it actually moves, not like kind of the original that just kind of barely got out there.
Well, the idea is to make ion propulsion thrust as strong as chemical propulsion, but it's an in-space technology. And the thing about it is that you can accelerate for a super long time. And so based on our calculation, we could get up to 1% the speed of light.
Okay. Nice.
Okay. Well, tell us what you want our readers to know most, or listeners, excuse me, and readers, because they're all going to get your book, to know most about your book and why you feel most strongly that they should buy your book. I mean, I really feel strongly about it. I'm so excited about it.
Well, the first thing is that everyone loves to see and hear something they've never seen or heard before, and that's exactly what this is. Guarantee you've never read a story like this one before. But a lot of it is going to be familiar to you, right? It's an American story, so you're going to see yourself, you're going to see your community in it, and what I'm hearing from everyone is that the science is just right. It's full of humor. You can learn about. Did you guys read about when my one day being a preacher?
I missed that one.
I missed that. Tell us about that really quickly.
Oh man! So I had to go to church every Sunday morning, right? And so Sunday school. And one of the things that happened is I ended up spending a summer reading the Bible cover to cover. So by the age of 13, I found myself as the adult Sunday school teacher. And you see, I'm an animated person, right? So when as I'm giving Sunday school lessons, I'm acting stuff out and doing, I'm just doing what I do, right? Just to, this is how I tell a story.
Right.
I don't really put thought in it. It's just how I explain things, right? Through body language. And so one day we show up to church and our Reverend Sherry shows up. And she starts going into this story of a dream that she had and how God spoke to her and told her that, he had raised up a new preacher in the midst. And then she calls me up to the pulpit. And oh my goodness, can you imagine? Because you know what it's like when you're a kid.
Yeah.
You never go behind the pulpit. Stay back, you gotta stay away from there. So it's like, come up to the pulpit. And so I'm 13, so I'm adult height. Skinny, but am I not ready for this moment? But, I have this thing in me where if I'm put on the spot, I do something, right? I'm not going to do nothing. I'm not going to freeze. And so, I laid the story out, what I did, and you're going to love it.
Cool. Yeah. I look forward to that. Cool. Yeah. So everybody, I think most importantly is we didn't go deep into all the things you went to. We kind of danced around all the story, and we kind of didn't take it in order. But your story is so fascinating, and of the things, and it is a story of overcoming, and it is, and a story of hope. And
absolutely.
Yeah, and I think people need that right now more than ever, because people are just looking for hope and looking for ways to, overcome adversity. And people, there's a lot of people, in my opinion, who seem to be focusing on so much of, and they're not finding the laughter. And you're telling your story, but yet you're giving the laughter and the hope and the joy in it. And that's what I appreciate about that.
And you know what? I'm one of the type of people that see the beauty in the ugly. And so the last thing I wanted to do is go in and be inauthentic and try to make myself, protect myself. I did the exact opposite of that. I'm like, I'm going to lay it all out bare because, from my perspective as a physicist, as far as I'm concerned, it could be 500,000 years from now and I'm already dead, right? So what does it matter? What do I have to hide? And the power of my story, it's changed so many people. And I'll tell you, it's been such a surprise to me. I'll give you one example. I gave a talk outside of Orlando a few years ago. And they had this thing where I was signing these cards and people were taking selfies with me after my talk. And so there were these two women that just blew me away. So the first thing is I had a show on that was very popular called Outrageous Acts of Science. And so people were coming up to me telling me their story. And again, remember, I grew up in segregated Mississippi. So this one woman walks up to me and instead of coming up with this glee like everyone else, she had a really serious look and a real look of resolve. And she started speaking to me. And she said to me, she was a woman, mid-50s, white woman, and she said, listen, I saw that you were coming, and I just had to come and see you. I drove down from, a couple hours to get here, and I just want to thank you for giving my mother joy in the last days of her life. She loves your shows. And while she's been in hospice, I made sure the TV always stayed on the channel with your shows at the time with Science Channel. And whenever you comes on, she's like, oh, there's my friend Hakeem. And, you know, she's telling me this, the one tear is falling down. And I don't know how to respond to this. I give her a hug. But it just blew my mind because here it is. I grew up in this segregated world. And now here's this Southern white woman who must be in her 80s or something, 90s. And she's thinking of me as her best friend, right? Mm-hmm. Then this other young woman came up to me. She was an African-American woman. She was obese and very short of stature. And she came up to me, and the moment she opened her mouth, she just started bawling, crying. And all I could do was hug her and hold her. And then when she gathers herself, she says to me, she goes, you know, I was homeless and I found out about you and your story, and I was able to get myself a job, and I was able to get in school. And I'm expecting that I'm about to hear this story of triumph. But then she goes on and she goes, and I failed my classes and I'm not doing well. And then she goes, but you made it, so I know I can make it. And I hugged her again, and she just looked at me and said it again. You made it, I know I can make it. She started walking away. And she contacted me again, literally like 2 years ago. That happened in 2017. And she contacted me again it was 2020, early 2020. And she's doing much better now. But it just showed me the power of my story and the impact that it has on people. And the last thing I'll tell you along those lines is, you know, I used to teach at this junior college when I was in Silicon Valley. And then I taught at universities, and then I showed up on television. And all people would come to me all the time. They go like, Hakeem, you know, I never thought I could do science, but I saw you, and I realized how cool it is, and I realized I can do it, so now I'm going back to school, right? And so over time, I realized everybody was telling me the same thing. Hakeem, I thought I was dumb until I saw you.
Right.
So read the book, and you're going to see if I can make it, you definitely can make it.
That's great. And so we really want to thank you for coming on. I look forward, you guys, everybody, June 15th. I'm not sure. That's just in a couple of days.
Just a few days away.
Just a few days away. Yeah. And everybody run out. Go ahead and you can pre-order it. And make sure he's already gotten all these great reviews. A movie deal is my understanding, but still one of the best. I always say, my book, The Magic of Connection, the biggest honor you can give an author is to also go ahead and go on after you read it and give them a great review. Definitely. That's a wonderful thing to do for whomever the author is. I think that's a wonderful, nice thing to do. And we really appreciate you being on. Where can they contact you? Through your publisher, or what's the best way to is it in your book where they write to you if they want to write to you?
Yes, ma'am. And you can always Google my name, or I'm on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn. If you Google me, I try to answer everybody that writes to me. I don't take it for granted at all. And you know, I'm here to help, right? It's you know, I grew up like in a country, they teach you make yourself useful, right? So I'm good at academics. So
okay, well, we want to thank it. I was trying to think I want to get the whole name of the book. And Matt, did you show it? It's a quantum life. What's the subtitle again?
My unlikely journey from the street to the stars.
I had to think about mine too. So a quantum life and my unlikely journey from the street to the stars. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you everybody for joining us tonight on SoulWhat, where we discuss things that matter to our souls, and you get to discern and decide what matters to yours. Thanks for joining us.
Good night, guys.
Good night.